Hi everyone, my name is Amy Wang. I am the volunteer coordinator for the San Francisco Pathways to Citizenship Initiative. I am also a staff attorney at the International Institute of the Bay Area. Today I'm going to do a quick training on Station 1 screening for our naturalization workshop. If you are watching this webinar, you have been assigned to Station 1 as a screener. So here is the flow of the workshop. In my opinion, Station 1 is the most important station of the entire workshop because this is where things really get started for our participants. After making it through pre-screening and registration, Station 1 is where participants are screened to see whether they qualify for naturalization or whether there are issues in their case that require examination by an immigration attorney or BIA accredited representative. In order to properly screen someone, you'll need to know the basic naturalization eligibility requirements. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly right now. In order to qualify for naturalization, an applicant has to be at least 18 years old. Also, the applicant has to have had the green card for at least 5 years. There is an exception to this rule. For people who are currently married and living with a U.S. citizen spouse, or received their green card through a Violence Against Women's Act petition or battered spouse removal of condition application, those people only have to have had their green card for 3 years, not 5. The earliest someone can apply for naturalization is actually 90 days before their 3 or 5 year anniversary of getting their green card, whichever applies. Another requirement is that applicants have to be physically present in the United States for at least half of that 3 or 5 year period. Applicants also have to have resided at least 3 months in the state in which the application will be filed, which in our case is California. The applicant, of course, has to be a good person. Immigration doesn't just let anyone become a U.S. citizen. This includes things like paying taxes, not owing child support, or not committing serious crimes, things of that nature. To become a citizen, the applicant also has to be able to read, write, and speak basic English, unless an exemption applies. We'll go over the exemptions a little bit later. Lastly, the applicant also has to pass a civics test, and again, there are exemptions which we'll cover later. Now we're going to go into what actually will happen at the station the day of the workshop. Just so you know, at every station there will be an entrance lead and multiple exit leads. You'll be introduced to your station leads the day of the workshop. They'll be wearing different color sashes so that you can recognize them from afar. The first thing you'll need to do is to let the entrance lead know that you're ready for the next participant by waving the green flag, which will be provided to you at the workshop. Once the participant is seated, you will of course greet the participant and introduce yourself. Next, ask the participant for their green card. Participants should have been pre-screened. So those who don't have their green card with them should have already been asked to come back to a future workshop or go to one of our agencies. This means that everyone who reaches your table should have their green card or at least have a copy of it. But just in case if they don't, if they somehow slip through the cracks, just let them know that they might not be able to proceed through the workshop that day. If you have a case like this, flag down one of the exit leads, they'll know what to do. Here are some examples of green cards. As you can see, the old green cards aren't actually green, but the new ones are. On the green card, you'll find the participant's name, as well as their date and country of birth. You'll also find the category under which the participant got their green card and their alien registration number, or what we call the A number. You'll also find the date that the participant became a lawful permanent resident, as well as the date that the card will expire. The green card itself is just proof of status, so the expiration date only shows the date the card expires and not the date after which the participant will fall out of status. This means that participants can still apply for citizenship even if the card has already expired. Once you see the participant's green card, check to see whether the resident since date falls within 90 days of the participant's 3 or 5 year anniversary of becoming a lawful permanent resident, whichever applies. The earliest we can help someone at the workshop is if they are 1 week outside the 90-day mark. The reason why we don't want to help participants fill out forms that they don't plan on mailing until months or even weeks later is because who knows what could happen in the meantime. They could travel or move or, heaven forbid, get arrested. We just want to make sure that the application is current when it is actually submitted to USCIS. So use the rest of the information on the green card to verify that everything is correct on the intake form. Speaking of the intake form, if you've already watched the orientation webinar, you know that every participant is handed a basic participant packet at registration. This packet includes the intake form, which is printed on the back of the tracking sheet. Most participants should have filled out the top of the intake form shown here on the slide before they reach your station. Just make sure that every box is filled out and filled out correctly. Once that's completed, you'll check the two-page red flag screening form. Again, the participant should have completed this before they reached you, but you should still run through the questions with the participant and push them on certain ones. This is because participants usually feel very comfortable answering no all the way down without fully understanding what the questions are asking. If you have any questions about any part of the red flags or intake form, please flag down an exit lead by waving a red flag, which will be provided to you. This is the first page of the red flag screening form. Most of the questions are pretty self-explanatory, but the arrows point out the particular ones that may require a little bit of pushing. The first arrow you see is for the question of whether or not the participant has ever had contact with the police. People may think everything is okay if they never had to go to court or if charges were dropped, but we really need to see the arrest report and court documents to know for sure what happened. So for this question, really push the participant to see whether they have ever had contact with the police. So not just if they've ever been arrested or convicted, but just actual contact. Even if it's traffic tickets. If they have traffic tickets, ask whether the tickets have been paid. This is important because it is possible that someone could have a warrant out for their arrest simply because they failed to pay their traffic tickets. Another question to push participants on is the second arrow there, whether they have ever helped anyone enter the U.S. illegally. When people think of alien smuggling, they picture hiding someone in a car or leading someone across the border in the middle of the night. But actually, alien smuggling includes paying for someone's passage or even just encouraging someone to come illegally. The last arrow you see there, it's always good to push participants on whether or not they have ever been removed from the U.S. A lot of people don't know that you don't have to go to immigration court to be actually ordered removed. If someone was caught at the border, they could be given expedited removal without ever having seen an immigration judge. So oftentimes people don't know whether or not they've actually had expedited removal. Of course, this should have been dealt with when they applied for the green card, but if it wasn't properly disclosed then, it could be a big problem at the naturalization stage. So push the participant a little bit and ask more broadly whether they have ever had contact with immigration or border patrol at all. In the end, even if they say yes, it probably won't be a big issue, but it's still best that they talk to an attorney just to be sure. This is the second page of the red flag screening form. Questions 15 and 16 deal with trips outside the U.S. We ask this because of what's called disruption of residency and abandonment. These are two major issues, and we don't want someone to apply for naturalization and risk losing their green card. If someone has any trips outside the U.S. that lasted longer than 6 months, they may have to deal with possible disruption, which is what question 15 is targeting. But question 16 is a little bit more subtle. It deals with abandonment, which can happen in a day or even a second. It really all depends on the intent of the applicant. Some people think that as long as they keep their trips under 6 months, it won't matter if they only return to the States for a couple weeks in between long trips. Push the applicant on how many trips they've gone on since they got their green card, not just in the last 5 years, and whether or not there was a pattern to their trips that would make it seem like they didn't really reside here in the U.S. Questions 21 to 23 deal with whether the participant qualifies for a language exemption, which we'll go more in depth on right now. Even if the participant claims that he or she has no problems with English, you should still check for the possibility of an English exemption if the participant seems to have trouble understanding you or if the participant seems to rely heavily on an interpreter. If no exemptions apply, warn the participant about the English exam and ask whether they think they'll be ready for it by the time of the interview, which is usually about 3 months after filing the application. Make sure that they understand that the English exam isn't just oral. They'll be required to read a sentence and write a sentence in English as well. The final decision on whether or not to proceed through the workshop is really up to the participant. If the participant believes that they'll be ready by the time of the interview, we're more than happy to help them fill out the application forms the day of the workshop. There are a couple ways an applicant can be exempt from the English exam. This cheat sheet will be taped to the table at Station 1, so don't worry about having to memorize them. The first exemption is the 55-15 or the 50-20 rule. If the applicant is at least 50 years old and has had the green card for at least 20 years, or if the applicant is at least 55 years old and have had the green card for at least 15 years, he or she can waive the English exam and do the entire interview in their own native language. This does not mean, however, that the applicant is excused from the civics test. They still actually have to study for that, just in their own language. The second exemption is the 65-20 rule. If the applicant is 65 years or older and has had the green card for at least 20 years, not only can the applicant waive the English test, they can also take a modified civics test, which is easier and includes less questions to study from. The last exemption is the medical disability waiver. If the applicant qualifies for the disability waiver, the applicant can get out of both the English and the civics exam altogether. One last thing about the exemptions, if the participant qualifies for the 50-20 or 55-15 rule, but doesn't think that they'll be able to pass the civics test, that's still a problem. Make a note on the tracking sheet and refer the participant to Station 2 to talk to an attorney or BIA accredited rep. Once you're done with the red flags, you're ready to fill out the bottom half of the intake form. This deals with the basic eligibility requirements and helps you figure out where to send the participant next. The next step is really easy. Just check to see whether the participant has signed the limited legal services agreement. If the participant objects to any part of the agreement, just flag down and exit leave by waving the red flag and having them talk to the participant. We're willing to be flexible on some things. We have in the past crossed out certain lines that have made it possible for some participants to be willing to sign, but there are also certain things that we will not budge on. Here is the limited legal services agreement. It comes in English, Spanish, and Chinese. Before you send the participant on their merry way, don't forget to fill out the tracking sheet. This is very important because this lets the exit lead know where to send the participant to next. Run through the checklist under Station 1. You'll find it right under the section marked Reg for registration. Make sure you check all that applies. Jot down any notes. You might have notes about any red flags the participant might have answered yes to, or maybe some notes about their English ability. Write down your initials, and under the box marked timestamp, put down the time you finished the screening. The timestamp is very important because this is what we use to keep track of the order that participants will be served at the next station. As for the box Go To station, put down the number of the station that the participant will head to next. Just as a reminder, here again is the flow of the stations. As you can see, there are 3 possible stations that a participant may head toward after Station 1. So how do you know where to send the participant? If the participant has any eligibility issues, send the participant to Station 2 for attorney consultation. This includes if the participant qualifies for a 50-20 or 55-15 language exemption, but may have trouble passing the civics test. Also, send the participant to Station 2 if the participant self-identifies as qualifying for a disability waiver. Disability waivers are not easy to get, so the participant really needs to talk to an attorney or BIA rep before they move forward. Now, if the participant has no eligibility issues, put down Station 3, form filling. If the participant qualifies for an English exemption, or the participant does not qualify for an exemption but insists on proceeding anyway, put down Station 3 as long as they have no other eligibility issues. But if the participant does have trouble with English and wants to wait until they are ready to apply, send them to Station 5 to check out. Just make a note on the tracking sheet so that volunteers at Station 5 know to give the participant a list of ESL classes offered in the Bay Area. Finally, flag down an exit lead by waving the yellow flag to let them know you are done. The exit lead will come over and direct the participant to where they need to go next. Once you have sent the participant on his merry way, alert the entrance lead that you're free for the next participant and repeat the process all over again. This ends the training for Station 1. I just want to thank everyone for volunteering with us. We really can't do events like this without your help. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at awang, W-A-N-G, at iibayarea.org, shown here on the screen. And of course, the station leads will be available if you have any questions the day of the workshop.